We tend to imagine warfare as this clash of titans, massive armies colliding in a storm of steel and fire, but history, as always, is a far more nuanced beast. Sometimes it's the units operating in the shadows, the groups that defy easy categorization, that leave the most indelible marks on the battlefield. We're talking about those soldiers who don't fit the mold, the ones who rewrite the rules of engagement. The unconventional units, the misfits, the warriors who weaponized creativity, cunning, and sheer audacity to achieve what was considered impossible. Think of artists wielding inflatable tanks instead of paintbrushes, or female pilots in flimsy biplanes, outmaneuvering sophisticated fighter planes. Imagine demolition experts with mohawks channeling ancient warrior traditions, or indigenous fighters moving like ghosts through jungles, terrifying technologically superior enemies. These are the stories of the units that history often forgets, the ones who operated outside the lines, challenging our very definition of what it means to be a soldier. This is the history of the Misfit Warriors. Picture the eve of D-Day, 1944. The Allied invasion of Normandy is about to begin, the largest amphibious assault in history. Tens of thousands of men, a tide of humanity about to crash upon the beaches of France. And among them, a unit so distinct, so seemingly out of place that they would become legends, the Filthy 13. These weren't your poster boy paratroopers all spit and polish. The men of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment's Demolition Section, led by Jake McNeese, part Choctaw Native American, were a breed apart. They cultivated a reputation for flouting military decorum, their uniforms a testament to their disregard for regulations. They were roughnecks, loggers, troublemakers, and barroom brawlers, the kind of soldiers who made officers nervous. And as D-Day approached, this ragtag bunch did something truly remarkable. They shaved their heads into mohawks, painted their faces for war, channeling the spirit of McNeese's Native American heritage. It was a symbolic middle finger to the rigid structure they so chafed against, a psychological tactic meant to unnerve the enemy. Their appearance was shocking, a stark contrast to the uniformity surrounding them. But these men weren't interested in appearances. They were about to embark on a mission where results were all that mattered, a mission where their brand of controlled chaos might just tip the scales of fate. The Filthy 13's mission was as dangerous as it was crucial. The mission to destroy bridges over the Duvet River. These bridges, if left intact, would allow German reinforcements to flood into the landing zones, potentially turning the tide of the invasion. The fate of thousands, the very success of D-Day, rested on their shoulders. Parachuting behind enemy lines, they were thrust into a chaotic landscape of hedgerows and German patrols. The fighting was fierce, the casualty rate horrific. Even within the already dangerous context of airborne operations, their mission was fraught with peril. Despite suffering heavy losses, the Filthy 13 accomplished their mission. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation and defiance, their unorthodox methods proving surprisingly effective. The bridges fell, disrupting German movements and buying precious time for the Allied foothold to solidify. Their actions on D-Day were just the beginning. The Filthy 13 would go on to fight in some of the war's most brutal battles, including the Battle of the Bulge, their reputation for effectiveness preceding them. They became a symbol of unconventional courage, proving that sometimes, the most effective soldiers are the ones who color outside the lines. The battlefields of World War II were landscapes of unimaginable destruction, where millions clashed in a brutal struggle for survival. But amidst the carnage, a different kind of unit operated, one that relied not on brute force, but on wit, creativity, and the power of illusion. This was the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. Imagine a unit composed not of hardened infantrymen, but of artists, designers, actors, sound engineers. The creative minds you'd expect to find in a bustling city, not on the front lines of a global conflict. Their mission was as audacious as it was unorthodox: to deceive the enemy through an elaborate performance, a grand spectacle of fakery designed to mislead and disorient. These masters of deception deployed inflatable tanks and artillery pieces, creating the illusion of entire divisions where none existed. They broadcast the sounds of troop movements and construction, fooling German reconnaissance into believing massive forces were on the move. They even impersonated other Allied units over radio waves, sowing confusion and doubt in the enemy's ranks. The Ghost Army was a testament to the power of unconventional thinking, a reminder that on the battlefield as in life things are not always what they seem. Their story is a fascinating blend of military history and artistic ingenuity, a reminder that creativity can be just as potent a weapon as any bullet or bomb. One of the Ghost Army's most successful deceptions involved deploying 500 inflatable tanks overnight. Imagine the scene: German reconnaissance planes flying over what was, just hours ago, an empty field, now suddenly bristling with armored might. The effect was stunningly convincing. These weren't crude fakes either. The inflatable tanks were designed with meticulous attention to detail, right down to the tracks and gun barrels. They even mimicked the heat signatures of real tanks to fool infrared cameras. German intelligence, presented with this convincing mirage, diverted valuable resources to counter a threat that existed only in rubber and canvas. Their sonic deceptions were equally ingenious. Using powerful speakers, they broadcast recordings of tank columns, troop movements, even the sounds of bridges being built, all carefully calibrated to reach German positions miles away. It was psychological warfare at its finest, preying on the enemy's senses, creating an atmosphere of paranoia and uncertainty. The Ghost Army's exploits might seem like something out of a Hollywood movie, but their impact was very real. They saved countless Allied lives by diverting enemy attention and resources, proving that sometimes the most effective battles are won not with brute force but with wit and imagination. World War II. A global cataclysm of unimaginable destruction. We often imagine this war in terms of tanks and planes, bombs and bullets. But amidst the wreckage of cities and the collapse of empires, something else was at stake. The very soul of civilization itself. Imagine, if you will, the great libraries of Europe reduced to smoldering rubble, priceless paintings slashed to ribbons, the legacy of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, gone. This wasn't just a possibility, it was a very real threat. The Nazi regime, obsessed with power and fueled by a twisted ideology, had targeted cultural treasures for looting and destruction on a scale never before seen. But standing against this tide of barbarism was an unlikely band of heroes, not battle-hardened soldiers but museum curators, art historians, architects, men and women armed not with rifles but with knowledge, driven by a mission to protect the treasures that connect us to our shared human story. These were the Monuments Men. They were a truly international force, these guardians of civilization. Americans, Brits, Canadians, even resistance fighters from occupied nations, all united by a common purpose that transcended the horrors of war, to save the irreplaceable, to preserve the past for the sake of the future. Imagine the audacity of their task. Picture them, these unlikely warriors scouring bombed-out cities, negotiating with suspicious villagers, following whispers and rumors that might lead them to a hidden cache of priceless art. They faced danger on all sides, not just from enemy fire, though that was a constant threat, but also from the chaos of war itself. A misplaced artillery barrage, a well-intentioned but misinformed bombing raid, any of these could obliterate centuries of artistic achievement in an instant. And then there was the enemy itself. The Nazis were systematic in their looting, spiriting away masterpieces to secret locations, salt mines, castles, even private collections. The Monuments Men were engaged in a race against time, a desperate treasure hunt with stakes far greater than any prize. Their successes were often the result of meticulous detective work, painstakingly piecing together clues, interrogating captured Nazi officials, following paper trails that led them deeper and deeper into the heart of darkness. But for all their efforts, the Monuments Men knew that for every recovered masterpiece, countless others remained lost, their fate unknown. The Eastern Front, World War II. a brutal struggle of unimaginable scale and ferocity. Here, amidst the clash of millions, a different kind of warrior took to the skies. Not seasoned aces and high-performance fighters, but young women, their faces barely old enough for war, piloting aircraft considered obsolete before the conflict even began. They were the Night Witches, the 588th Night Bomber Regiment of the Soviet Air Force. Imagine the scene. Pitch black, except for the flickering flames of a distant battle. The air is thick with tension, the ground below a terrifying tapestry of muzzle flashes and exploding ordnance. And then, a sound. A faint whooshing, growing louder, like the whisper of a predator on the wind. The Germans called them Nachthexen, these women who haunted the night sky. They flew Po-2 biplanes, flimsy craft designed for crop dusting, not combat. Their planes were slow, almost painfully so, lacking radios, armor, even parachutes. Yet in the hands of these women, these seemingly insignificant aircraft became instruments of fear, delivering death from the darkness. Their tactics were as unconventional as their aircraft. They would idle their engines on approach, gliding silently towards their targets, transforming their antiquated biplanes into ghostly gliders, emerging from the darkness without warning. The conditions were beyond harsh. Imagine the biting cold of the Russian winter, the cramped cockpits open to the elements, the constant threat of enemy fire and mechanical failure. These women flew multiple sorties a night, sometimes as many as 18, their missions ranging from bombing runs to harassment raids to supply drops. And they were effective. The psychological impact of the Night Witches was undeniable. German soldiers, already on edge from the constant pressure of the Eastern Front, began to dread the coming of night. The whooshing of their engines became a harbinger of death, a reminder that nowhere was safe. They paid a heavy price for their courage. Many were shot down, their flimsy aircraft offering little protection against enemy fire. Others succumbed to the elements. Their bodies never recovered from the frozen wastelands. But their sacrifice was not in vain. The Night Witches proved that courage and determination know no gender, that heroism can be found in the most unexpected places. Their story is a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who fought for their country, for their comrades, and for a future free from tyranny. 1917. The Great War rages in Europe, a conflict of unprecedented savagery and scale. America, drawn into the maelstrom, mobilizes its young men to fight for freedom on foreign soil. Among those answering the call were thousands of African Americans, eager to prove their patriotism and valor. But they faced a different enemy at home, one more insidious and entrenched than any they would meet on the battlefield: racism. Imagine the scene. Black soldiers, full of pride and eager to serve, finding themselves relegated to menial tasks, denied the opportunity to train for combat, treated as inferiors by the very army they had volunteered to fight for. This was the reality faced by the men of the 369th Infantry Regiment, a unit drawn primarily from New York's Harlem neighborhood. They were given the most menial of tasks: digging latrines, unloading supplies, tasks that had nothing to do with fighting and everything to do with humiliation. Their white officers, many of them openly racist, doubted their fighting ability, questioned their courage. But the men of the 369th, these proud sons of Harlem, refused to be defined by the bigotry of others. They would prove their worth, not with words, but with deeds. Their chance would come, not under the American flag, but under the banner of France, a nation that, despite its own prejudices, was willing to utilize the fighting spirit of these determined soldiers. Shipped to France, issued French rifles and equipment, the 369th was thrust into the crucible of the Western Front. Here, amidst the mud, blood, and terror of trench warfare, they would face their destiny. The Germans, who had heard rumors of a black American unit fighting alongside the French, called them Harlem Hellfighters, the Hellfighters. Imagine the terror of the trenches, the constant shelling, the rat-infested dugouts, the ever-present stench of death. And then, the order to go over the top, to charge into a storm of machine gun fire and exploding artillery shells. The Hellfighters faced it all with a courage that belied the prejudice they had endured. They fought with a ferocity that shocked the Germans, earning a reputation for unwavering tenacity and sheer grit. They never lost a man to capture, never surrendered a trench, never retreated an inch. Their heroism was recognized by the French, who awarded numerous individual acts of bravery with the Croix de Guerre, their highest military honor. But back home their sacrifices were largely ignored. They returned to a segregated America, their service seemingly forgotten. Picture this. 1942, the world is on fire, locked in a global conflict unlike anything ever seen. The Allies are reeling from a string of defeats, desperate for any advantage. Out of this maelstrom, a new breed of warrior emerges, a commando force unlike any other. They were the first special service force, but history would remember them by a much more evocative name, the Devil's Brigade. Now these weren't your typical GIs. The Devil's Brigade was a melting pot of American and Canadian volunteers, a rough-and-tumble mix of lumberjacks, miners, loggers, native Indian scouts, trackers, trappers, and hunters. They were chosen not for their spit-and-polish discipline, but for their raw toughness, their ability to survive and fight in the harshest conditions. Their training, well, it was the stuff of legend. Up in the wilds of Fort Harrison, Montana, they were pushed to the absolute limit, drilled in hand-to-hand combat, parachute drops, skiing, mountaineering, you name it. They were taught to be silent predators, to strike from the shadows with deadly precision. But the real heart of the Devil's Brigade, their calling card, was their mastery of night fighting. They would blacken their faces with boot polish, becoming phantoms in the darkness. They were experts in infiltration, slipping past enemy lines to sow chaos and fear. The Devil's Brigade, they earned their nickname in the crucible of the Italian campaign. They were the ones sent in when a mission seemed impossible, when conventional tactics wouldn't cut it. They were masters of stealth and surprise, feared for their lightning raids and their ruthlessness in close combat. One operation in particular cemented their legend, the assault on Monte la Difensa. This mountain, it was considered impregnable, a natural fortress bristling with German artillery and machine guns. Previous attempts to take it had been met with bloody repulses. The Devil's Brigade, though, they were given a simple order: take the mountain. So, under the cover of darkness, they did the unthinkable. They scaled a sheer cliff face, a climb so treacherous that the Germans hadn't even bothered defending it. 1/3 of the brigade was lost during this assault. They surprised the enemy at the top, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat, taking no prisoners. By dawn, Monte la Difensa belonged to the Devil's Brigade. Their exploits, they sent shivers down the spines of the German high command. Here were men who fought with a ferocity bordering on the primal, men who seemed to vanish into thin air, only to reappear where you least expected them. What connects these extraordinary units across the vast canvas of military history? What binds together mohawked paratroopers, phantom armies, art historians in uniform, and Canadian lumberjack commandos? Each emerged from necessity, from those desperate moments when the old ways of war proved insufficient. The Filthy 13, they showed that sometimes controlled aggression and unwavering brotherhood trump spit-shined boots. The Ghost Army, with their inflatable tanks and sonic deceptions, they proved that imagination could be as potent a weapon as any bullet. And the Monuments Men, those unlikely soldiers of culture, they reminded us that preserving civilization's achievements can be as vital as winning battles. The Night Witches, those daring women flying their obsolete biplanes, they embodied courage and tenacity. The Harlem Hellfighters, they fought not just the enemy, but prejudice and discrimination, proving their mettle on the battlefield and paving the way for a more just future. And the Devil's Brigade, those North American warriors of the night, they embodied courage, tenacity, and an almost supernatural ability to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. These were the Misfit Warriors, the unconventional, the underestimated. They were the artists, the outcasts, the ones who didn't fit the mold. But in their willingness to challenge convention, to adapt and innovate, they changed the face of warfare forever. Their stories serve as a potent reminder. Sometimes the most effective warriors are those who defy expectations. Which of these units surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into military history, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for stopping by.